Sitharaman, big speech, eighth consecutive budget speech, and lots she had to say. And this one was a big one. Lots of good news for the poor and middle class. As Prime Minister Modi said, the goddess Lakshmi is going to smile on the poor and the middle class, and clearly it's happening.
Aditi, I can very clearly say that, which is what I said at the beginning, also the first half of the show, that Prime Minister Modi is not someone who makes loose remarks. So, and they are very calculated. This was clearly, he was signaling to the markets that brace for a good budget, and of course to the middle class. And for the middle class, it's been an incredible wait. It's been so long. And like we said, even the earlier part of the show, HNIs like you will continue to pay tax, but lesser people like us have a lot to gain from.
Yeah, no, and this is absolutely fantastic because it also puts back a lot of, money in the hands of the middle class, which is going to boost probably domestic consumption in the long run, in the short run rather, and also in the long run. The markets have shot up. Anil, we were just looking at the markets, viewers, and this is such a happy, good budget after a very long time, really.
Yeah, the markets, typically, Aditi, love the icing on the cake, as it were. So till she reached the segment on the income tax proposal, it was doing well. It was about 350 points up. But the minute she mentioned the income tax proposals, it took off. And it's now, I think, some 800, no, it's dropped back. It had jumped up to about 800 points. But forget the markets. I think the larger point, markets will rise and fall. That's a dynamic which we can't outguess. But look at it in terms of what it means. When you raise the threshold to 12 lakhs, see, the pain point of this last 4 years, 5 years now, since COVID, has been the middle class. See, the bottom of the pyramid was taken care of by the government's free food to a degree, not entirely. Free food and all these programs and social welfare. So in a sense, their pain was mitigated. The top don't need to be taken care of. They take care of themselves, as you know very well, which leaves the middle class. So they've been hurting. And that hurt has only gone worse because of two. One is a perception issue. You see this, what we call the premium market, premium economy in India. Now everything, in every commodity you have a premium segment, which is basically the HNIs. So they also see the demonstrative impact of that. You see, look around you, vehicles. Second, inflation was hurting them. So it was eroding their purchasing power. So now when you raise this threshold, you definitely have a sugar high for the middle class.
Right.
And that translates to sentiment. When it translates to sentiment, it impacts overall, and middle class drives sentiment in any country.
Yeah, interesting you talk about sentiment, Anil, because see, I was just speaking about these taxes to some of my colleagues earlier, and they pointed out that in a country like India, and the middle class has a lot of angst because of this, because corporate taxes have been lowered, are sort of competitive. You have to make them competitive as far as the global economy is concerned. So corporate taxes are lower, and as you pointed out, for HNIs, income tax slabs are really steep, really high, and the middle class, the irony is not lost, right? Even the middle classes, they pay a pretty high. Many of them, just entering into the upper middle class, even they pay a 30% slab or a 25% slab. So it's just that many of them said that hamare desh mein to corporate tax is less than the income tax. That also is an irony, and the whole point, you were talking about the perception, and that is what builds that perception of that. And as Rahul Gandhi and the opposition parties keep saying, "Soot boot ki sarkar." Of course, Mr. Modi has never paid heed to those kind of things. He's gone ahead with whatever reforms were needed, and corporate tax did need to be brought down to compete at the global level. But having said that, today, I think the last 4 or 5 budgets, I think I've been hearing that income tax slabs have to come down, are going to come down. That's the expectation. That's what we are hoping for. But this income tax bill now, which is going to come, what are you expecting to be in that bill? Because one of the big things that Nirmala Sitharaman said, the focus is on the ease of compliance, make the life of the taxpayer easy.
See, Aditi, that's the key. Like we said in the first half of the show too, see, no tax is going to be simple, nowhere in the world, unless you're in Dubai, UAE, where they slap a 5% VAT and nothing else, no income tax. That's you can't afford that. So, which means any tax system is going to be complicated. But problem is the execution.
Right.
Again, I go back to that statistic where I said that 97% of direct tax collections accrue from advanced tax and TDS, which means for 3% you cannot be, imposing such a dramatic burden of compliance vis-a-vis the taxpayer. So that when I raise the threshold limit, I am taking you out of that potential harassment zone. And please remember the FM right at the beginning said, trust first, scrutinize later.
Absolutely.
That I think is a very important point. So to stick just to carry your point further, they have changed the political economy of taxation in this country. What you said, earlier you would feel the pain that corporate taxes were relatively low, but they're not exactly comparable. But in a perception game, it matters when you're also hurting with inflation. That has been corrected.
Right. And how about inflation? As an economist, and you are almost an economist as far as I'm concerned. So, as an economist, how do you perceive the impact on inflation out of all the measures that were announced today? It's not going to happen tomorrow, but how do you see the short-term impact of this budget on inflation? Because that is also hurting the middle class to a very large extent.
See, Aditi, the inflation impact is a complex dynamic. It's not the budget alone that will impart it. Yes, if like Trump, they had increased tariffs, then there is a direct correlation in terms of the inflation impact. A lot depends also on how the Reserve Bank of India proposes in its upcoming credit policy, because they signals rather, because at this point they have been looking at overall retail inflation, which has largely been up because of food inflation, which is what the economic survey repeatedly made this point, that listen, this inflation is not generic in nature, it is a very segmented,
right.
food segment oriented. So you cannot take a perception on the call on the entire interest rate based on this. Now what the FM has done in her budget is she's balanced her books, fiscal book. That's very, very important, not just for in terms of macroeconomic signal, but rating agencies have only one tick box in their way they look at any country, which is your fisc. And in there, she has scored again. She has stuck to the path she had committed, which is a great thing. So the inflation impact will take time to work out in the system, but there will be a slight boost because sugar high. Like if you have more income in your hand, particularly the bottom of the pyramid, or rather the middle of the pyramid, then they will spend.
So that solves the problem of the domestic demand, so to speak, or domestic consumption to a certain extent. But how about,
No, problem is not generic again on demand. Rural demand is fine.
Yeah,
problem
the
was
urban demand. The urban demand, right.
So it fits with that very well.
It fits with that very well, the income tax thing. And what, of course, Surya Bhatia is going to join us very shortly. So we're going to get an understanding from him on what we can expect in the new tax bill, the new income tax bill, which is going to come next week as announced by the finance minister. But let's just roll back a little, because that's one part addressed, urban demand, boosting urban demand.
Before you go further, just one
yes.
interjection. There's one very important element in it. She has announced the rationalization of TDS rates.
Yes.
Tax. It's very important. It affects both individuals and
as
companies.
Well as corporates, yeah.
Because there are some nearly 30 sections varying from 0.1 to 30% TDS. And it depends on all kinds of permutations and combinations, leaving it open to interpretation and the tax overreach problem. So that's, I don't know.
One thing, sorry, I was going to go into the private investment part, which is the other problem, the other challenge which is plaguing the Indian economy right now, given the sluggishness of the economy, or rather the growth path being plateauing. But before that, I also want to talk about these GST rates, for instance, the TDS rates, for instance. Now, these, we of course will know more when we get the fine print of the budget to understand what exactly is the impact and how it's impact. But as far as the private investment is concerned, That is another problem. Are there any roots or shoots in the budget that are addressing that issue directly?
Definitely. See, the central tenor of FM's eighth budget is ease of doing business and ease of living. If you had to take away two big takeaways, this is it. Ease of living, I'm talking of income tax, etc. Ease of doing business is what you referred to. And they have recognized the problem that it's not just the central level, but the state level too, which is a point Sandeep made,
Yeah.
that the center is relatively better off than what we see at the state level. So they have now decided, from what I gathered from her speech, is that they're incentivizing the states to improve ease of doing business. So you see, it's what Jyoti said in the first half of the show, that there are pain points for them, which is ease of doing business, taxation issues, GST particularly.
Compliance,
Then
yeah.
GST is like they say, story abhi baki hai. Now that cannot be decided in the budget.
Correct.
It's by the GST Council, where all the state finance ministers are there, and they have been kicking this can down the road for the last 1.5 years. And I think this budget should be a signal to them that this is
Okay,
it.
now let's just get down
you
to it.
have to rationalize, bring it down to 3 rates. Then what Jyoti says, all the, all the matters, all the, what do you call, all the dots are,
Getting
ticked.
connected,
So,
yeah.
and they are ready to roll.
So now I'm just going to introduce the other guests who are joining us. Thanks everyone for taking out the time. I see Surya there, and Surya, you're the man of the moment, frankly. New income tax bill, huge changes in income tax structures. Can you break it down for our viewers? What exactly are we looking at?
I think, hi Aditi, hi Anil. I think that's very interesting actually, Aditi. I think the way it has been put across by the Honorable Finance Minister of giving the cue that the next week you find that the new income tax bill comes into play, and at the same time also talking about the changes, actually you can call it a little bit sweeping changes, not entirely, but to a certain extent. Changes being brought in the new tax regime. I think you can see the cues over there. Going forward, you have to look forward for we moving on to the new tax regime going forward. While we do have an option of the old tax regime, nothing has been said about it, but I think the cues come very clearly from her. So new tax regime, I think, done a good job. I think everyone knew that something has to happen to boost the consumption and to make the middle class, which actually felt left out. So if you look at the slabs which they have introduced, you have find 100% reduction of taxes for people coming in the bracket of up to 12 lakhs. So which means 80,000 of tax saving for them, as she said. And likewise, from a 25% to 100% impact of people on a 25 lakhs of our total income. I think the numbers are not bad. And as she also herself mentioned out, well, the final details will come out, of that approximately 1 lakh crores, sorry, of the direct taxes, I think they have to take care of, which I think they manage well, because my fiscal deficit still gets pegged for the new year of the financial year 25-26 at 4.4%. So I think overall, yes, good changes in the TDS, TCS also. I think the 7 lakh to 10 lakh is very good, is very welcoming, because people were letting a lot of concerns of a 20% TCS applicable, and that money got stuck. Money was available, but got stuck. You got the credit, but was not available. So 7 lakh to 10 lakh for senior citizen, boosting from the 50,000 rupees to a 1 lakh. I think it's a very good change. So I think overall, yes, good changes, impacts people in the middle class segment a lot, which hopefully should do better for the country.
That's interesting. Anil wanted to ask you something, but just 1 second, Anil. I just want to tell the PCR that we're getting a lot of audio feedback from there. So just can you please keep noise under control there? Yes.
Thank you, Aditi. Surya, I had if you could walk us through what will probably be the most impactful move in this budget as far as the Aam Aadmi goes, is the income tax proposal. So, there are these various rates, 0 to 4 lakh, 0%, 4 to 8 lakh, the new rate structure, 5%. If you have it before you, can you walk us through, the impact it will have, say, in an average newsroom, for example?
So, for example, if you look at the slabs now, Anil, which has been introduced, 0 to 4 lakhs is nil, 4 to 8 lakhs is 5%, more than 8 to 12 lakhs is 10%, but up to 12 lakhs, there is no tax payable. You can use a Section 87A, unless you have a special rate, which is like capital gains applicability, on which you have to pay a tax. That was there earlier also. From more than 12 lakhs to 16 lakhs, the tax rate is 15%. 16 lakhs and more up to 20 lakhs is 20%. 20 lakhs and more to 24 lakhs is 25%. And more than 24 lakhs is 30%. So you typically see the up to 24 lakh bracket. You have seen the changes of tax benefits available to all tax assessees is from a 25 to 100%. And from a tax saving from an amount point of view, it can vary from a 80,000 rupees to a 1.1 lakh per person. That's a good number to look at if you look at the tax coming in your account, which is not being paid.
So how does it compare, Surya, to an existing, the existing tax structure? So let's say, for example, 12 to 16 lakhs, you're paying 15%. So what was it now, and how
The
does it?
comparison, how does it benefit people who are in that 12 to 16 lakh bracket?
See, when you see a 12 to 16 lakh bracket, you actually end up saving, while the exact numbers need to be worked out, but you actually save around 50 to 60,000 rupees, depending on your what your exemptions are, but not which are available. But few like NPS is still available. So you end up saving that. I think the cues which she gave was, while the numbers will come out finally, but 70,000 to 80,000 is your tax saving if you come in the slab of a 12 lakh to a 18 lakh from an income level. So if your income is between 12 to 18 lakhs, your saving in hand, your tax outflow will come down by 70 to 80,000 rupees.
And on
If you are in the
TC,
higher slab from, let's say, a 24 to 25 lakh slab, your tax saving in hand would be, sorry,
Okay, we are having connection problems, but
And,
can you, yeah.
Surya, on TCS, very interestingly, they have withdrawn the TCS on education loans, right?
on the education loans. Yeah.
So that's a big relief
So which is
for all
actually
the
good,
kids
Anil,
going
if you look
abroad.
at the logic of the same. If I take absolutely, if you look at the logic also, it makes very good sense, because if I'm taking borrowing money, and on that borrowed money, if I have to pay tax deducted at source, so it's actually even not my money. It's a borrowed money on which tax has been deducted. So I have a double whammy for myself. I think that was a lacuna which they have actually removed now.
Interesting. So one question that somebody just asked me is, if she's announced all these major changes right now. So what is the new income tax bill going to bring forth for for us? What are we going to look? What should we look for or expect in that?
I think the focus which she has mentioned very briefly on that, which is expected next week, I think something is left for presumptions over here on kind of ensuring compliances, reducing compliances for people, making it more tax friendly, making it more simple. That's what she said, and more investment friendly with a focus on middle class. So something more you may expect in the coming week.
Okay, something more. So you're saying of the announcements she's already made today, the middle class can expect more. So the Lakshmi, goddess Lakshmi, is really going to be smiling on the poor and the middle classes, as the Prime Minister said. Let me at this point bring in Rajat Sethi. Rajat, thank you for waiting patiently, and thank you for taking time out to join us. Rajat is a political and economic commentator. He's Rajat, the whole aspect. We are very, the kind of discussions and the kind of hyperventilating that happens over the union budget, you never see it at least in the national psyche as far as the state budgets are concerned. But clearly the states have to get more proactive, and we need to actually start looking at individual state budgets, because if India has to grow, every state has an equal responsibility, not just the union government. You'll have to unmute yourself, Rajat. I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Is it correct?
Yeah, we hear now.
You're absolutely right. Central policy, central government can broadly, articulate what are the broad brush themes of economic growth story, but the real action happens in the state, and therefore one needs to look at the state capacity. Look at the finance ministers of various states. What kind of intellectual capacity, what kind of think tank support, what kind of bureaucratic support do they have? The state of affairs in states, and I've served as the advisor to 3 chief ministers, and I can tell you the state capacity within the state governments is abysmally low. and that is where the actions have to happen. We as a nation do not pay attention to much of the activity that goes around, coming up with these state budgets. Mostly they are incremental in nature. There is just no big ticket ideas being discussed at the state level. So I believe, we as a country need to start thinking seriously about capacity building within the finance ministries of respective states as well. That is
All
how
right.
the loop
So,
is going to close.
so just if you could elaborate a little more on what exactly do you mean by lack of capacity? What exactly are
See,
you referring to?
state capacities essentially are that, that thinking capacity, the intellectual heft that is
Okay.
needed to, think out of the box. Consider municipal bonds being issued. It used to be a big thing and a big theme for the state governments to go out and raise their own capital. Today you look at the state governments, they largely there has to be a carrot and stick policy instructed by the central government that do the reforms. Otherwise we are going to cut out on your ability to borrow from the RBI. Look at the financial strength, the fiscal strength of these state governments. Most of the doles that are happening at the state. So essentially, what has happened is good economics has been pushed to the center, and all bad economics has been pushed to the state.
Okay.
All parties, by the way, not just the BJP, Congress. All of these parties do essentially bad economics in states.
So what is
They
the
do not.
what is the solution, Anil? I mean, you want to come in here.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up. Is there I mean, don't you think there were some signals in this budget to effect some kind of course correction? I mean, it obviously will take years to fix,
Yes.
but there seems to be some signaling, right?
Yeah, so one of the policy measure that the finance minister sort of touched upon was that you will be allowed half a percentage point of your budget or receipts that you can go out and borrow if you do certain capital investments or bring in certain reforms. So that is a theme of carrot and stick which has been followed by the finance minister for the last 4 or 5 years. This is to discipline the states, because you cannot give a free pass to the states so that they keep on borrowing. Most of our public debt source, the aggregate, the general fiscal deficit, is now being fueled by the states, not necessarily by the central government. And if the political parties do not come out with a solution, the Supreme Court will have to step in and try and control what is happening at the states, because right now states are bleeding individually. These states, half of them are bankrupt, and more states are falling for these low hanging freebie schemes just to win election, because this is an easy sort of a policy approach. When you do not work hard for 4 or 5 years, you need to throw lollipops at people. And this is sort of the easiest, though very expensive scheme from a government standpoint. Look at the state of Maharashtra. 50,000 crore of the state budget has to be now annually allocated to Pyari Behna scheme or Ladli Behna, whatever you want to call. I
Absolutely.
mean, look at the missed opportunity. This 50,000 crore could have gone into creating permanent jobs. On one side, we have these Ladli Behna, pregnant Behna, and on the other side, you have China, who is working on these big ticket items, and the opportunity lost is going to cost us eventually very, very dearly. So
Yeah,
therefore,
but
you know,
yeah, unfortunately, like China, India's political compulsions, take precedence. And frankly,
but then
in a
we have to still
democracy, we
compete.
have to be so. So, no, I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I completely agree with what you're saying. I'm just looking at the other side of the coin. What do you do? How do you balance
So
welfare
this is what
with
I'm
good
saying.
economics?
Right. So essentially, the root cause of the problem was money at hand. A lot of states are attempting to do that. The central government is also attempting to do that through more prudent fiscal measures. And this is why it goes back to the moot point of state capacity. If our state leaders and our state finance ministers do not have that innovative understanding of how to do fiscal prudence, they are going to fall for these low hanging fruits only, which I call lazy policy making. And this needs to be called out at prominent places. Prominent economists have to start talking it. Prime Minister has talked about it already, but there is no follow-up action, because, as I said, all bad economics is at the state. We talk about good fiscal discipline numbers at the center and we laud ourselves, but the aggregate fiscal, which is state plus the center, remains abysmally bad.
Remains, and there seems to be now, at least the economic survey pointed out very clearly which road to take. And, in a lot of ways, Anil, I thought the budget did echo the sentiment, the mood which was there in the economic survey. Surya, would you agree with that? Except, of course, I don't know once the new income tax bill comes, but I don't think it will affect GST in any way.
No, there's nothing.
So
wrong
yeah,
with
exactly. But this problem, before in our
No, I
pre-budget
don't think so. I
conversation.
don't think so. Will back GST.
Sorry, you're saying? Surya, you said something. Sorry, we missed you.
And then GST, I don't think will be impacted over there. I think.
No, not at all. But
Yeah, I was
I'm
saying that GST will not be impacted. That will not be part covered over there.
Yeah, so which is where I'm coming from. Pre-budget, pre-budget in our discussion, Anil and I was discussing how the problem continues to be of, over-regulation. Over-regulation, creating complex revenue collection systems, trust deficit between the taxpayer, and I'm talking about the entire tax paying fraternity, not just the personal income taxpayers. How you think that the budget, the new income tax policy is going to address that aspect also, or just the other part of it?
No, you do expect that to be addressed, I think, because there was a lot of concern happening on the lot of tax assessees. And I think that's what she also said, the Honorable Finance Minister, saying very clearly that we do want to address the compliances issues and we want to create trust first. And I think
Yes.
that was a starting statement when she started that point. And I think that's very important because when you see that happening, right, coming from her mouth, I think it's really important because you need to create that trust, that confidence, and we hopefully should see that in the next week.
Hey, Surya, I wanted to draw, since you're a personal tax, income tax expert, wanted to draw your attention to this move to limit the TDS, the TDS limit for senior citizens being doubled from 50,000 to 1 lakh. How beneficial is this going to be? Because India is also aging, so there are lots of senior citizens besides me,
No, definitely, I think it helps because when you see a typical, on the practical side of this, Anil, when you see the income tax being created and planned in a small family, both husband and spouse are typically senior citizens and they distribute their asset investments, let's say in fixed deposits, so that the TDS actually comes down. And I think that helps both of them because if you look at two member, and we don't have a concept in India of a single filing for a couple. So when you file two separate returns, you make sure that the income which you earn on 1 lakh plus 1 lakh for two family members of senior citizens, actually there is no tax at source. So there are many instances which you have seen when people have been going ahead and filing returns only to claim a refund of it because there is a TDS. Their total income may not be taxable and they have missed out filling that Form 15G, Form 15H, which kind of helps them in not deducting taxes. So this really helps the senior, and I think that's the move in the right direction.
And another one, Surya, they have raised the annual limit of TDS on rent from 2.4 to 6 lakhs. That's huge.
That's big, and that's actually what you want them to do, not do small changes just to have a tick on the box, but do changes considering the current inflation, considering the current income and the current lifestyle of a normal person. So therefore, this 2.4 lakhs to 6 lakhs is really very encouraging, and we hope to see more of this in the new tax bill.
So, Surya, from what you just said, very clearly implicit in what you said is that there is a formal acknowledgement by the government of a trading up of India. Right?
That's right.
Very interesting. But let me also bring in Rajat at this point. Rajat, since you've been advisor to several state governments and we've been talking about this, what do you make of the big gifts for Bihar in Budget 2025 ahead of assembly polls?
See, in all honesty, I just I just feel that Bihar got mentioned more. The other states would have also gotten their due, which didn't get time in the speech. But one should look at the entire finance bill to sort of understand like what is there between different states. What is the level of comparison? Is it the case that Bihar is getting disproportionately greater attention for political reasons or not? One thing we need to keep in mind that Bihar and to some extent UP are the two most in need for government funds and are least developed. They need to do the catch up really quickly, and they need to swiftly move ahead with capital investments, with infrastructure build up. To that extent, I mean, Kosi Tunnel, again, anything to do with Kosi, we've been languishing. Bihar has been waiting for funds to be dedicated to the mayhem that Kosi River still brings. And I believe that if this such capital investments go in and try and for once just finish off all of these infrastructure gaps which are impacting such a vast population, that needs to be taken care of. And politics or no politics, we have to progress. And if any other
Absolutely. So,
state
but I want to also get the politics perspective on this, and I want to come to you, Anil. What the politics of this?
I will share my views, but I just want to get Rajat's views on a very important political economy of this budget, which is the middle class is benefited in a big way, Rajat, and they've always been a very voluble voice in any country, in India more so than others. So they are clearly expanding, and some projections say there will be almost $500 billion by 2030. So how do you see this budget, especially in what Surya also said, it signaled a trading up, an acknowledgement that the middle class is growing. So how do you view the political economy of this budget, particularly viewed through the prism of taxation on the middle class?
So, I mean, from an analyst standpoint, it is right that you're trading up, and looking at it from that perspective. But look at the entire year, the middle class, which is the most vocal class, and also continues to be the setter, the narrative setter for the entire country. This class has been largely feeling the heat of being left behind. When there are so many freebies all around us, and you'll continue to see that the narrative is shifting towards that direction, you will suddenly realize that the middle class is losing hope on the government, and there is a slippery slope. The more the political parties go out and proclaim greater amount of freebies, the pinch is so evident on the middle class. They feel that they are carrying far too much weight, and government isn't caring enough for them. And I believe that part of the 2024 impact of a sort of an indifference from the middle class was a tough lesson that the BJP has learned, that you cannot continue to ignore the middle class. You have to look at those memes which are circulating, because those memes, nobody wants to do that in their free time. It is out of compulsion. People are feeling the heat, and they're realizing that cash at hand is being taken away from the middle class, and something drastic had to be done. I'm happy that both the prime minister and the finance minister considered the gravity of the situation and did not opt for a small tinkering based approach. They went in
Yeah.
for a bazooka for middle class.
Yeah.
And
Bazooka for
I
middle
believe
class is
that
perhaps the right. So yeah, there was no tinkering, which is very common in most budgets. So I just want to, just add to that, because there was a sea water survey which Anil and I were just discussing, on the budget, and it showed that in 2013, the kind of the just before the Congress UPA was toppled and the NDA came into being, the dissatisfaction, the adverse effect of inflation on your life, 2013, it was at its highest. It was at 53% of the respondents saying that they were the adverse effect is too much. And after that, it was downhill, downhill, downhill over the last 10 years of the Modi government. And again in 2025, it's coming back to the same. It's 51% in 2025. And so it's the same level of dissatisfaction with inflation, and how the middle class is really, which is really the class that the BJP wants to own and represent, and has been very supportive of the BJP government.
Oh yeah, I entirely agree. See, even the sea water survey, I suspect, I don't know what the sample base is, but it's primarily the middle class from
Yes,
the way
yes, it is.
it
It
has
was,
moved.
yeah.
So which we explained in the first half of the show, the poor in this country their pain point was mitigated to a degree by the free food grains and various social welfare programs. The HNIs, like we said, take care of themselves, which left the middle class exposed to the vagaries of inflation. And please don't forget that since 2020, this country, actually any economy in the world, but India particularly so, has experienced one economic shock after the other. 2020 we had COVID. Next year we had the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The year after that, the US Fed decided to increase interest rates, exporting US inflation to every country in the
And
world,
then the Middle
including
East
India.
war.
Yes, then the Middle East war, and now the US-China face-off. So you see, it has never happened in economic
You're
history of the
forgetting
world.
Trump. We've not mentioned the word Trump.
So no,
in
I'm saying
the-
it has never happened in the economic history of the world that you see not one, but two, not three, but four back-to-back shocks. So the brunt of this, the middle class has taken. And like Rajat rightly pointed out, they had a feeling of neglect. And inflation really hurts. So the fact that it is not politically manifested itself as far as the BJP or the NDA goes is largely for other factors. But the pain point cannot be ignored. And I think this budget, that signal is very important. See, this tax loss for the government, I suspect, is going to be minimal. Surya can help us there. But the impact it does to your mojo,
Yeah.
because you're down and out and you feel, that sugar high, that could translate to sentiment, which hopefully will translate to a national sentiment.
All right. You want to come in, Surya, because Anil mentioned your name there.
I think he's on mute.
You are on mute again, Surya. Can we just check your audio? Have you gone on mute?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, you're now.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Oh, sorry. So what I was saying that I think Anil is spot on. I think that's why the markets were actually earlier reacting very positively to see what the real intent is. And while all the consumption doles which have been coming out is positive, but the tax benefits being given onto the middle class, which actually pushes back my my overall revenue from that perspective. Hence, my fiscal deficit is still maintained well, but markets reacted from that perspective. But I think the real intent will come out, I think, sometime today or maybe Monday, how the real the markets react when they do the finer points of the budget. But that will actually be helpful to know, because what you really want right now, it may be a little slow journey, but you do want the capex to go up. I think the investor-friendly state index, I think that's important. I think you will really want every state to take some responsibility and ownership and onus of it, if they really want to kind of have FIs or FDIs coming to them for investments. You cannot have them now on platter. With all the economies opening up, you need to push and do something smart enough to attract foreign money. And I think those days of easy money coming is not happening anymore.
Surya, I also want to talk to you about the stock market. The FIIs pulling out in droves in the recent months. So the investor sentiment, especially for the retail investor, especially for those who started investing, let's say after 2020, me being one of them, for us, this is like the first time that we've seen the markets go in that much of a, at least I'm seeing it for the first time, not very, everything seems to be in the red. What is your advice for the retail investor right now, as far as after the budget is now out, there's a huge positive sentiment, there's a big bazooka, as Rajat pointed out, for the middle class. How do you see the markets taking shape and reacting to this? Today we saw a high. It's now going back to normal, Anil, right?
No, it's about 400.
Now it's about
points.
400 up. And so on Monday, you're
It's
saying
600 points up.
Okay. On Monday, we're going to see the real impact. What is your advice for the retail investor?
I think retail investors, if you use that word retail over here, Aditi, I think the key is patience. You cannot expect every year to deliver returns. It's not a one-way street. And if you look at the quarterly earnings, I'm not even going to the US scenario or the FI scenario right now. Your earnings are the key from here. So my quarter 3 earnings have been reasonably okay. Q2 was not that good. I think, but you also have the general Lok Sabha elections, then the US election coming in forward. So therefore, the real key will actually happen when you see the earnings happening for this current running quarter. And that's what really will drive how the markets behave from here. Of course, external factors do make a difference. FIs do carry an impact. Whatever you may say of DIs, FIs carry their own weight. And while FIs are not being as a net investor, FDIs are net positives. But for retail public, FI is what really matters. And I think you do want earnings to have happening from the next quarter onwards to see the results. But till the earnings are not there, you have to be careful and just hold your assets. And that's what we told all retail investors. Do your allocation well. Don't go into one asset class just because it's doing well, because you never know how it turns around. If you look at the last calendar year, I think which was the best asset class performing? It was gold. So you have to just manage your assets well and diversify. And if you hold for the right period for the right asset class, I think it should be well for you.
Surya, quick follow-up. Can we pick your brains to share some advice to all those who are watching, young people who are going to benefit from this 12 lakh threshold? So what should they do with the extra income in their hands in securing their future? Should they be opening PFs or should they be going the SIP route? What would be your advice?
I think Anil, the young generation also needs to be smart enough for saving for the future. And I think they are actually smarter than what we think then. What they really need to do a little better is actually the fact, start saving for long term. What we do actually, and that's where the wrong, I think the folly lies in, that we all have myopic views. 6 months, 3 months, 9 months of underperformance, we change the course. That's not how these markets work for that generation. And I think I'm just giving a little bit more gyan on that. It's actually about compounding. If you hold for the right period, even if you do a normal compounding, I think the money doubles for you in every 5 to 6 years in a country like ours. Very simple logic if you use. How do a country grows from an income perspective as an investor, from a retail perspective, is that it's your country's GDP and your inflation combined together is what your growth should be looking at. So if I'm talking about a GDP at a 6% and inflation thereabouts, I think we should talk about 12, 13%. And I think if you are beating inflation by 2 to 3% from here, I think the job is well done. Don't even try to kind of reach out to a very high double-digit returns, because in a long term, if you are able to beat inflation well and able to invest money regularly, there is no reason why you will not do well in the long run. But patience, as I always say, holds the key.
Great advice, Surya, as always. But tell me something, the SEBI has introduced the 250 rupees SIP. So that should also help a lot of people who are outside looking in.
Absolutely. I think the SEBI is doing a great job on that by trying to kind of induce people to invest, creating many opportunities, investment strategies, and safeguarding them for any I think wrongdoing by any of the players. It just gives you more confidence, more trust that there is someone at your back who's going to take care of you. That's really helpful.
Okay. On that note, let me also bring in Abhijit Iyer Mitra. Abhijit, thank you for joining us and taking out the time on this big day. Bazooka for the middle class, really. Lakshmi goddess is really, PM Modi heralded her on the start of the budget session, and Nirmala Sitharaman is bringing it home. Audio. You'll have to unmute yourself, Abhijit. Okay, clearly not. So let me put that to you. Because before I saw Abhijit, I wanted to ask a question about AI, because AI is the big thing, especially so there's the US, which is leading in there's ChatGPT leading in the, and suddenly you see DeepSeek coming into the picture, and suddenly you see the US markets going down in a shiver, the US companies, AI companies, India, of course, all this while watching from the sidelines. Given how we have a national AI mission, given the push that we have for AI, do you think this, and we've really not progressed anywhere, not done so much in it. Do you see this budget and the kind of incentives that Nirmala Sitharaman has promised for the AI sector adding to that?
See, Aditi, it's incorrect to say India is missing in action on the AI scene. Wait, let me explain why. So, you may not be in the DeepSeek league or the ChatGPT league.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we have created Bhashini, And we have got startups like Sarvam, which have created this India's biggest problem is languages. So there are some 18 odd languages which you need. Communication is a big problem. So people like startups like Sarvam or Bhashini, which is a national project, are helping India bridge that. But yes, you need to be in the big league, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
That no, I mean a budget can incentivize, but it cannot
Yeah,
be
that's
the
what I'm
prime
saying.
motive.
Are those incentives are ample enough? Because what I do know, and from what I have been reading, there's a 500 crore allocation for AI centers, 75,000 more, of course,
That's
for AI related education and research.
But those are peanuts.
Exactly.
I mean, even this DeepSeek so-called number, which is 10 million, but today WSJ has done a story that is substantially much more. So even if it's 10 million, this is peanuts against 10 million.
Exactly.
So there's no way you're going to compete against a chat GPT. So no way. Budgets can't signal that. That has to come collectively elsewhere, and I think Abhijit's back.
No, I don't see Abhijit on the screen yet. Let's see when he comes back.
Okay, I want to go
But
back to your question on which I had asked Rajat to weigh in first. And you see, I was going through her speech now that we have access to her speech. So she, see very clearly, this is the politics of this budget. The journey of development, she says, has four elements to it. One, the powerful wings of agriculture, MSME, which is small scale sector, investment and exports. Okay, so she's clearly identified four buckets, all of which are huge. Agriculture, because 40% plus of India's labor is in agriculture, though it contributes very little to our economy. The small scale sector is a dynamo of the Indian economy, but most unsung hero. Investment, which we have been struggling, and the ease of doing business, ease of living, everything fits into that. And exports, unless you improve domestic competitiveness, which will come through all this, you will not grow. The fuel, she says, that's a very important word, is reforms. Okay, so I think there's a government which should be credited for standing up there and one embracing business despite taunts like Soot Boot Ki
Soot Boot Ki
Sarkar,
Sarkar.
and batting for reforms so openly. See, earlier it was very covert, the support for reforms. You would stand by business at night when nobody could see you, but publicly you never embraced them. But this government is saying that they are a legitimate stakeholder in India's economic growth. Then there's the guiding spirit, inclusivity, which is carry everybody with you, which is true in a country like India. And finally, the destination is Viksit Bharat or developed economy. So I think this budget is very important. It's the first signal of Battleship Potemkin effecting a course correction towards a new economy, a new way of living. At least I would hope so.
One would hope so, absolutely. And given the sentiment, as I haven't been able to read the speech yet, but given what we heard, obviously we have to grow at a certain percentage, which is at least 8% and above, to achieve that aim of Vikasit Bharat by 2047. Right now, as per the economic survey, we are only going to do about 6.3 to 6.8 next year, which is lower than what we did 1 year ago. So clearly there is a slowdown, but going forward there is absolute hope. But Abhijit is back with us. Abhijit, please weigh in on your sense of the budget, your first thoughts. You're barely. It's very faint, your voice.
Can you hear me now?
I can absolutely hear you now.
Okay, that's it. Look, for me, I don't get so carried away by budgets. I look at more of the macro picture because even if I'm paying less tax now, my issue always is profligate expenditure because that means I'll have to pay a lot more later on, right? And unfortunately, starting off with the formation of a Makhana board makes me a lot less optimistic than Anilji is at the moment. The last thing we need right now is a whole bunch of fat cat bureaucrats sitting on a Makhana board on getting salaries that I pay for, uh, with air conditioning that I subsidize in a building admittedly atrociously made, again subsidized by my earnings, right? Uh, I am not too sure these reforms are coming. If you've had a tax issue and dealt with our tax people, you'll realize that no amount of a new tax code can actually, bring in critical thinking or problem solving into the taxman's, into the IT department's head. What's even worse is the fact that even if you bring in critical thinking, the way the processes are structured is that it will automatically go towards another, vetting, where the taxman also gets into trouble for applying critical thinking every now and then. Uh, how are we going to overcome this? Second, you really can't grow without manufacturing, and manufacturing is the one word I heard the least of during this budget. You need a lot more manufacturing. You need a lot more of an education focus. Unfortunately, here, e- every kid who graduates, the mother thinks that the child is the next Steve Jobs or whatever when they're not even fit to be a factory floor worker. How many people do you know that are willing to become factory floor workers? Nobody does. Even at the smallest level, they want to become a desk worker. Whereas the training, see, the economy is an organic creature. A finance budget by itself does nothing. It has to be synthesized with education policy, with your industrial policy, and things like that. There were some very good announcements regarding the decriminalization of 100 more uh, um, codes and things like that. But there is so much more to be done. In terms of, let's take a simple thing. Your income, the income tax slabs that we saw, which I'm very grateful for. Thank God the middle class got something finally after 12, after 11 long years. Uh,
Okay,
capital
your
gains tax.
audio, your audio is
Can
again
you?
going. It's very muffled.
Is it better
It's
now?
you start. It's very muffled. Can I get somebody to fix your audio for you, and then I'm going to come back to you. But coming to you, Anil, what he said, and rather coming to you, Surya, on what Abhijit said, his point is simple. That what he's saying is that how do you do it? How do you remove the bureaucracy in tax compliance? Do you think that the new tax bill is going to address that? And even if it does, do you think implementation with the kind of spread that we've had, the bureaucratic spread and the tax regimes that we have had over the last many decades, do you think it's going to be possible to do the turnaround with just one bill?
See, I think it's not about one bill, Aditi. It's about the move in the right direction. I think this
Okay.
was calling of the day and it should actually have been coming much earlier, but still better late than never is all we can say. One thing which they are doing right, and I think that's where you get the more confidence in them, is the fact that you're going into faceless regime. The more people you put on the block, and if you have technology, and you're all talking about the AI coming to play, can we use the technology to make a more faceless, in which we are already going? We're talking about 99% people being trusted. Can we do it 99.99% of the people being trusted? That's where you want to go to. See, 99% looks very attractive to me, but when you talk about absolute numbers, the 1% is huge
Yeah.
in a country like ours.
Yeah,
Can I do
absolutely.
99.99% and move in that direction to see that my confidence in them actually go a few notches higher? And that's what I really want. And how will that actually come? How can I ensure it becomes paperless, it becomes faceless, so that there is no human intervention beyond a point? Only for that 0.01%, I should have that intervention, because I should know that unless something I have done gravely wrong, I will not be taken to the cleaners. And that's the message which this new bill has to address. And that's
So,
why, how maybe we hope so, that because of that, compliances may come down, but at least you know that you will be able to sleep well. And that's what a tax SSE wants.
so actually, the key word is what Surya said, hope so, which we all hope, because this is a proposal. But Surya, I'm curious that by raising the threshold to 12 lakhs, doesn't that minimize your interaction with the potential tax scrutiny or the tax authorities? So this is a classic disintermediation. So we solved our banking problem by creating ATMs. We solved even the ATM problem by creating UPI. Because passports, we created disintermediation by going online. So is this a continuation of that? And in that sense, it'll help general public.
Yeah, because a lot of people, but the numbers have not come out, we will see that a lot of number of people actually got out of the tax bracket. And if they have got out of the tax bracket, the probability of their receiving notices, scrutinies, assessments actually is not happening anymore. But I do not want, Anil, that 99% we are talking about increases because of that only. I
Got it.
don't want that to increase 99.2 because of that 7 lakh to 12 lakh change. I want the 12 lakh and more people who are actually paying more tax should be also. And
All right,
that's
let
where
me.
the real crux of the problem is.
So Surya,
Can I
what you
use that middle class population to really
So Surya, what you're saying is that we have never rewarded people for paying income tax. We only penalize them for allegedly not paying tax.
So it's all about optics, Anil.
Okay, all about. But Anil, I just also want to come to you, and I'm going to ask you this question, which Abhijit raised about manufacturing not being mentioned adequately. It's not that she did, but manufacturing, of course. What more can we do? Because there was a time till just about less than a year ago where everybody was talking about how India is going to be the next manufacturing hub because people across the world are getting more disenchanted with China and they're going to move over all their manufacturing to India. There's no magic or no big bang that's happened to that effect. Having said that, in terms of now with Trump in the White House and with tariffs again becoming big. Now, the latest is he's saying that you come and manufacture here and I'll give you a 15% rate and you make somewhere else and bring it here, I'll impose huge tariffs on you. Should India also be looking at doing something like that to boost manufacturing domestically?
See, Aditi, this what you're referring to is an industrial policy. Every country has started adopting an industrial policy ever since the West realized that the Frankenstein they created in China was coming to bite them. Okay, so it is now every country. India has been also at it. That's why the Make in India came about a decade ago. But I don't agree with Abhijit that the manufacturing was not referred to in this budget.
It was,
No,
yeah.
no, not that. Actually, that's a mistake. We cannot look at direct cues on manufacturing. If you go back to what Jyoti told us, the pain points of manufacturing or industrial activity in this country go beyond their own. Why is it that they are disincentivized? Your tax regime, your regulatory regime, your compliance regime, and many of them are at the state level, particularly the compliance and regulatory regime. Those have to be fixed. So you see, you cannot yes, India could be a destination, but why would anybody come here? So they are coming here under PLI. In PLI, to unpack a very complex otherwise term, it is nothing, it's performance linked incentive. So the government of India is saying that 30% I will subsidize you. So which means that is your number. 30% is the lack of competitiveness in India at this point of time, which is because for various reasons, regulatory, infrastructure,
And historical
logistics,
reasons.
work ethics,
Yeah.
lack of skilled labor, all these things. So when you fix that, you see what's happening in iPhones. Okay, you see what's happening in other electronic areas. But this is a stopgap. You have to solve the core of your problem. There, Abhijit is right that the budget, the budget can't be the document, but you have to be. But I would still give a marks for holding up reforms very clearly and holding it up publicly in Parliament. I think that's a very big deal.
But there was no big bang reform announcement, so to speak.
You see, the last time we had a big bang budget was in 1927 with Chidambaram's budget, which, the market serenaded, everyone took off, newspapers also, including my own paper, we all backed it. But next day, the whole thing collapsed because it turned out to be a complete, damp squib. So, the like I said, they can't be, budget is not
Not
what
the
it
place.
was. No, what it was,
Was.
what even 10 years ago. See, the GST took
Has
indirect
changed.
tax outside. So this has primarily become a direct tax and expenditure budget. Okay, it is no longer a revenue budget, which is why I was arguing that remove this idea of revenue targets, because half of it is not in your control. GST is a huge chunk. So you need to focus on growth, and that has been the primary focus of this budget.
Okay, so Abhijit, can your sense on what Anil is saying, the growth momentum. Do you think this budget actually, if not in, there were no big bang announcements as far as reforms were concerned, but do you believe that the general direction we are taking towards that, towards structural reforms required by the economy, those will be in the pipeline soon?
So, the whole point, I mean, first, no country goes to this tamasha of a budget speech, right? It's only a big deal
True.
in India. Right. Now, that being the case, you then need to show how integrated your policy is, because if you're not bringing it all together at one point, it means you aren't thinking everything through together in an integrated way. Let's take something simple. If you want to start a restaurant in Khan Market, the building code has different standards, the fire code has different standards, and this is where the entire rentier babucracy comes in at every level of it, right? You have these mismatches across the entire economy, which nobody wants to talk about, and that is where the entire problem is coming in. Now, you can offer 30%, I'm going to subsidize you 30% for manufacturing. But what when you have a completely untrained workforce, when you don't have the labor laws required to do, see, no matter how much you subsidize, you can even offer free land, right? It's still not going to happen till you get your labor laws in order, your labor quality in order. Remember, quality is a function of labor, right? Your education system in order for that. It is too integrated and organic for us to be doing this piecemeal. In fact, if you don't do it in a synthesized manner, it can actually bring about very significant negatives, right? Because then the positives you do in one thing are seen as not having paid off and therefore not worth pursuing. We have seen this over and over and over again with policy, where things are just discarded because they are deemed to have not worked, when in fact they did not work because the entire ecosystem. You see this in defense all the time. You'll buy a standalone product which can't communicate with anything else. And then we sit around and say, well, what was the point of spending so many hundreds of thousands of crores buying it? Uh, this is chronic. So I agree with Anil to a point. My issue here is larger. I keep hearing about reforms. This was meant to be a maximum governance, minimum government
Minimum
sarkar.
government.
But I can honestly tell you, I have never had bureaucrats dance on my head more than they have under this government.
Okay, I'm wondering what they're dancing about. Anil, you want to come in on that?
No, I just want to ask Abhijit that, see, Abhijit, prior to this, they didn't even acknowledge the problem. All that you said, they have acknowledged. So I would give them marks for acknowledging. Implementing is another story altogether. But at this point, this budget acknowledges the challenge of ease of doing business. They're incentivizing states to do reforms. And like we discussed, PLI, they are trying to fix the problem all in a band-aid approach. But really, in a complex country like India, you have an opposition which is constantly baying on, how now the latest was that there will be only 2 or 3 OBCs presenting the budget. So, this is the backdrop, the kind of noise. So, don't you acknowledge the fact that at least they have acknowledged the problem?
So, this is like acknowledging that a person with high cholesterol needs bandages. A person with high cholesterol needs.
Abhijit has come today with saying, okay, nothing, everything is not good.
I'm sorry, I'm in no prisoners mode today. I'm like, kill all the prisoners.
Yeah, kill all of them, yeah.
Human rights violation. So, band-aid approaches, we've gone past incrementalism and band-aid approaches. And, let me give you, we keep talking about technology. The pinnacle of technology is your defense sector. If you want to see the dysfunction, in India, we haven't introduced a 4th generation so-called indigenous fighter, whereas the Americans and Chinese have rolled out a 6th generation fighter. We don't even have a single 5th generation fighter in the Air Force. Now you take that and extrapolate that. The problem in India is we see technology and industry as somehow a substitute for human incompetence. We, as opposed to investing in the human beings are what make the economy. You have to invest in humans. You can't give a rickshaw driver a Ferrari and expect his earnings to go up. Because anybody sitting in a Ferrari will say, I'd rather sit in a Wagon R. There's no point me sitting with the limited space of a Ferrari and पीछे सीट में मेरे बच्चे क्या बैठ के मरेंगे घूट घूट के मरेंगे नहीं, that is not the way it works. So you have to match everything to the human. We have to understand you invest in human beings. We're not investing in human beings. That's
And
a very
that,
big
and you mean education by that within India. It's not that the Indians can't do it. We are going across the world and doing it. I think
We
Trump
are.
has more Indians in his core circle than any
America America is a fairly easy place, not California, of course, but say Texas or something like that is fairly easy to do business in. Even that is too much for people like Trump and Elon Musk. They want to cut all of it. You know, we voted for a Javier Milei, and we have to settle for somebody like Gavin Newsom. I mean, still fairly business friendly, but
a little out of
business
his.
relative in the Indian context.
But Abhijit, your point about India's inability to come up with a fourth generation fighter, what do you say for a country which is, the FM just announced in the budget that this is 2025 and we got independence in 1947. 50% of rural India is still going without drinking water on a tap. So our capabilities are abysmally low.
But we can solve this. If you remember about 10 years back, the agriculture, I was very stunned, Anil, when you said that the agricultural workforce is now back up to 40%.
It's
If you
over
remember
48,
10, 12 years back,
yeah.
we had brought it down to something like 13 or 14%.
No,
So
no,
where has this thing gone back up?
No,
Because
never.
the
No, I said the labor.
Labor.
Share of labor in agriculture, not share of agri.
No, sorry, share of labor in
Labor.
agriculture had gone down to about 13, 14%.
No, it
Yeah.
came down lowest was about 45%, which has now gone back up over 50.
I remember very different figures from the end of the UPA era. But 40% right now is astounding for a country like us. And this too unproductive labor, which is not yielding any tax benefits at all. Yeah, when you want to do something, that this is why we were battling tooth and nail for those farm laws to make it a very productive, and we can do very, very well. We could have moved on to hydroponics and things like that and brought down prices, increased, brought down carbon footprints, given land shares to people, make the landowner a shareholder in some kind of a this thing and do. There were lots of options out there. वो तो पूरा भाड़ में चला गया. We were expecting, a climb down. We got full unconditional surrender a la General Tojo and Tokyo in 1945. What do you do?
But hopefully, with George Soros out of the picture, we can look at a brighter future.
Hopefully. Now, that is a very important point Anil raised. Because, every time you try to do some deep reform like that, these Hillary Clinton Foundation, Open Society Foundation types, USAID very specifically, comes in and starts doing all this hera-fairy out here. Remember, the anti-Kudangulam protests were completely foreign NGO funded. But at that time, you had a Chidambaram who had no qualms about taking out dandas and beating up all those people and charging 11,000 of them with sedition. तो मारो ना, डंडा दे तो रखा है. हम तो बोल रहे हैं there is not enough fascism in this country. I want more fascism in this country. और डंडा निकालो. The fascist sign.
Now you are
Just going back to the budget, Aditi, one point we should dwell on is this special package is announced for shipping industry. This shipping in India is not even a blip on the global map. Our share of global shipping capacity is 1.2%. So now, a lot of reasons. Primarily, the problem was with the tax side and the processes and the regulation.
Very, very pathetic for a country surrounded by the sea.
Exactly. No, and you cannot be a world power without being a maritime power.
Absolutely.
Okay, look at China. I don't know the exact share, but they are probably about 60-70% of global shipping. Korea is a very big player of shipbuilding. So this is, I think, a big move. See, that's what I'm saying. So this budget
lot of
lays
small,
the foundation,
yeah, lot
which
of
if you pull together, it tells a good story, but Abhijit is right. It's a question of walking the talk. But my point is, you're at least talking the talk.
Okay. So we are thankful that somebody is at least talking the
You
talk.
acknowledge the problem.
We've acknowledged the problem
I
and
mean,
going
ask
forward.
Rajat,
Let me get in Rajat at this point. Rajat, you just weigh in on this.
See, this walking the talk business, we've been talking for the past decade or so, and Prime Minister of all people, he's one man who's, based on whom and based on the promise that he had for the nation, we all left our cushy jobs and came back to India to be part of that, big arc growth story that was being set out. Prime Minister also said in a recent podcast that he's a risk-taking man, but unfortunately, he's only been able to take 1% of the risk that he could potentially take, which means he's still saving his 99%.
Yeah,
My
but he
point is
did
that
bring
it is
in the
high
but he
time that
did
he
yeah he I thought I'll just interrupt you. He did bring in the farm laws, and then he had to backtrack. He took
no,
that
so
risk,
again,
but in a democracy like India, how easy or how difficult is it to take those risks?
see, again, he is one man who can actually ensure that carrot and stick is balanced in such a way that everything is made possible. And I believe it is his lieutenants, not he himself, who erred in not ensuring that the farm bills could go through. The people who were responsible to effectively communicate did not do that. And it was a colossal mistake, not of policy intent or policy design, it was policy communication. One of the first courses that I studied at Harvard Kennedy was in policy, 50% of the job is policy making, the remaining 50 is communicating. If you cannot communicate your policies, you are as good as not having that policy in the first place. Again, I'm going back to the basics. See, Prime Minister has the intent. He was the one who has been constantly saying that Maritime Development Fund, the MDF, has to be to the tune of 1 lakh crores. 25,000 crores spread over 5 years is peanuts. Do you understand what it takes to bring shipbuilding into India? The ship leasing infrastructure, the ship leasing policies international, you have to compete with Greece. How on earth do you think, when you've not been able to successfully bring aircraft leasing into India, how can you bring shipbuilding and ship leasing into India? These are distant visions, and it is, just a simple tinkering will not yield any results whatsoever. I mean, it is better to, give ladli behna these 25,000 crores rather than just putting it here, which is not going to incur any benefits.
But
My
at
point
least,
is,
would you agree that at least a start perhaps needs to be made
see,
at some
certain
point?
things, but shipbuilding is a different beast altogether with a different scale. You cannot measure, such deeply entrenched industries. Just like the chip fabrication couldn't have happened with minuscule measures. You had to bring in 1.5 lakh crores, 2 lakh crores to be put in taxpayers' money to be put in those specific sectors to actually even just barely kickstart that engine. So these are very difficult, high up fruits. These are not low hanging fruits. So if you're aspiring to go for them, back it fully. Do
All
walk
right.
that extra mile. Things happen. And on the other side, on the tax side, we were deliberating upon. I hope and believe that the tax code that is being written is simpler. The tax form that we fill is simpler. I don't see any more tax incentives being given out next week, but the process would be simplified. One thing that I genuinely feel that the government should do is to remove targets from GST officers and income tax officers. These
Yes.
assessing officers and GST officers still have targets. When you have targets, you clearly mean that you do not trust the citizen. There could have
Right.
been a different approach.
Absolutely. This is
Not
exactly what we've been
100%,
discussing. Yeah.
500%, 1,000% penalty
Agree with
on
you, Rajat.
anybody who steals taxes. Put 1,000% penalty on them. But randomly issuing summons and putting targets on individuals. You know how these summons mostly are not generated by AI. But the solution is not through AI. The solution is still through manual intervention. You have to go out and sit in front in an embarrassing mode before this babu and hand out those small money so that he can clear your summon, which in the first place was ridiculously generated by computer systems. So my
Okay.
problem here is that
I'm,
Prime
yeah.
Minister has to do deeper diagnosis, and I don't blame him for not highlighting these things in the budget. You have the entire financial year on which you can plan, and otherwise the competitive landscape is getting more and more intense. A lot of my batchmates from IIT are not tax residents in India. They've moved their tax residents out of India. They've not given up citizenship. but they moved out of India to Dubai where they're paying zero tax. They're like, what do I get? I'm not getting clean air, clean road, or clean water. What am I giving taxes for? If
I would
Indians
tend to agree with you, Rajat, because a lot of my friends who make much more money, who own businesses, they've happily moved to Dubai because it's
Exactly.
just that much easier.
Okay, I want to go to Surya, if you don't mind.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
just want to, Surya, there's a very important component of this budget which relates to the small and medium enterprise. We all know their biggest problem is access to credit. So we have, things like ONDC, sorry, not ONDC, that I forget that similar product that is being created for access to credit using their working capital. But they have announced the credit guarantee cover in the budget will be enhanced for MSMEs from 5 crores to 10 crores. They're expecting this to create additional credit of 1.5 lakh crore in the next 5 years. And for startups, which is a very small number, from 10 crore to 20 crore, the guarantee fee being moderated to 1% for loans. So how do you see this impacting the small sector, which is, like I said earlier, I think they contribute 36%, so they are the
Yeah.
dynamo of the most unsung hero of India.
I think, Anil, the numbers are very small over here. I think the way the segment of the
Your
SME space
audio
are,
is not clear. Unmute yourself, please.
I'm
You might have
unmuted.
to unmute yourself, Surya.
No, can you
Yeah,
hear me? I'm
hear you
unmuted
now.
actually. Yeah, I'm saying the numbers are fine, but I think the numbers are too small, Anil, over here.
No, I
The
can't hear
numbers
you.
need to be.
Can't hear you. Let's fix Surya's audio, and then I just want to take your thoughts on this, Surya, and then we'll let you go. Can we figure out what the problem is? You're not on mute, right?
No, can
I
you hear
can
me
hear.
now? I'm not
Yeah,
on
I
mute.
can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. So what I was saying, I think the numbers are moving in the direction, but the challenge, which is the numbers are very small, Anil, over here. The numbers are not large. Because my SME space is actually big. They're actually the spine, if you look at from the economy point of view. Whether they are organic or inorganic, they actually find the spine of the country. And for that, I really need to push hard and give them numbers much more than what is being offered. Yes, the good part is something is offered, but the numbers needs to grow from here. My credit card limits, my enhancing of my limit available, that 1% discount available, fine, all in the good direction. But it needs to be meaningful and more meatier. It really need to be pushing hard for them to really thrive organically. And I think you need to really do something more than these numbers which have been thrown at that segment.
Surya is so right. The MSMEs employ 7.5 crore people. They generate 36% of our manufacturing and they produce 45% of our exports. And still they get such a raw deal on the tax
Yeah.
side, credit side, as well as the regulatory side. We are not even gone there. The harassment that
There.
small and medium enterprise suffers in this country, both at the national and state level, is horrible.
Yeah.
And
Unfortunately,
what-
this. Yes.
and
Yes, Abhijit.
add to what Anil said. The compliance hurdles for going from a micro to a small, from a small to a medium are so great that you actively disincentivize the micro from becoming small, the small from becoming medium. It is an absolute nightmare out there. The next
But the
thing that
big
ends up
and but the big continue to get bigger.
but the big continue to get bigger because see
Yeah.
there is no once you're a 20,000 crore company uske baad there is no biggest category out there. The problem here is when you want tech bol rahe ho, in the west it is actually the MSMEs that drive technological innovation, because when you look at a system as a whole, it is the MSME that is producing a 1% improvement in every single compound, which when you bring 100 of them together into one functioning system, then produce a 100% increment in that system, or even more if they work synergistic. So you, on one hand, you want to make it more tech, 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 but you don't even understand the very basic of how to grow an MSME. A micro is condemned to permanently be a micro. A small is condemned to permanently be a small. A medium is condemned to permanently be medium. और फिर बोलते हो एजिलिटी, सिंगल विंडो क्लियरेंस. भाई मेरे जिंदगी में मैंने कभी सिंगल विंडो क्लियरेंस हिंदुस्तान में अभी तक देखा नहीं है. अगर किसी ने देखा, ये खुदा का बंदा मेरे को दिखा दो.
Okay, minimum government, maximum governance. That was the promise. Not happened so far. The government is only bloated in the last 10 years. But quickly, I'll just do one round with each of you. Your rating for this budget from 1 to 10 and why. Abhijit, let's start with you since the bureaucrats are hassling you way too much.
Let's say 8 out of 10 for the direct income tax relief. I'm so grateful for that, even though I have not sounded very grateful. But I'm doing Sadar Pranam.
Okay,
Uh,
finally, something that you're happy about. So you're doing Sadar Pranam to the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, or Goddess
both,
Lakshmi?
the whole cabinet, Prime Minister,
Not,
Finance Minister.
not Goddess Lakshmi.
Lakshmi, though, of course, she's always in my prayers.
Ah, okay. All right. Surya, your says.
I think on the tax reforms, I will give them 9. Boosting consumption, 8. I think they have moved in the right direction. So I think from that perspective, it's a good budget.
So two challenges, or rather three challenges we spoke about, Anil, when we started. One was boosting domestic demand. The tax relief will come in handy there, at least in urban centers. The second, of course, was in terms of investments, increasing private investments, because that is sluggish. So that we said, okay, there is a boost for she's given various SOPs to increase manufacturing for the sector. If the manufacturing sector, given some incentives there. The third, of course, was reforms, big structural reforms needed by the economy. No announcement there, but you're saying they don't have to necessarily announce it to the budget as long as they've stated their intention. So, your sense of, because the whole idea is 8% growth every year, only then we can expect to be Vikasit Bharat by 2047. Towards that objective, where does this budget take us?
It's a, I think first off, I would give this budget 8 out of 10 for effort and intent. And I'll hold back on its ability to implement it, as every other panelist has rightly cautioned. Now, in terms of getting India to a Viksit Bharat destination, I think it's on a wing and hope and prayer, because you see, we are now finally in a good news of all of this conversation today, that we have identified the problem in the room, which is primarily regulatory nature. Yes, what famously referred to as regulatory cholesterol. So you need to fix that regulatory cholesterol, and there the states are the biggest contributors here, because a lot of stuff is in the state realm. It's not entirely in the center's realm. So like Abhijit pointed out, labor laws, again, they have created a labor code. I think they're still not notified it, but it's for the states to implement it. So you have identified the problem. To me, that is, I think, a first step to solving the problem. The Babugiri has to be tackled step by step. I think the signal in this budget where the FM particularly said, I remember two words, light regulatory touch, trust first, scrutinize later. I think these are very strong signals, and the Babus, they should now adopt a carrot and stick approach as far as the Babus go, to make sure they walk this talk, because they are tripping it up. Like GST on popcorn. Ridiculous.
One question. Why did it take them 10 years to talk? By now, we should have started walking the talk. We should have started talking 5 years ago, if not 10.
I don't know which rock you've been living under, Aditi. There's a thing called politics. You have to stay in power to implement a lot of these things. And staying in power is not easy in a country like India, when everything from Soot Boot Ki Sarkar to George Soros are targeting you through directly and indirect means. It's not an easy task. And don't forget, unlike China's bull run, that was the biggest, the golden age of globalization. Unfortunately, India's bull rush is coming at a time of deglobalization. So you see, you have nothing going for you excepting your own country. So which is what I'm saying, that you're now acknowledging the problem, because so far we're not even acknowledging. I mean, anybody who raised the problem was being attacked by the government or their spin doctors. But today the finance minister has formally acknowledged the challenge. So I think that, give her credit for that and give the government credit for that. It's now for the PM to walk this through the rest of the states. How do you incentivize state? Look, this government pulled off GST. Let's not forget that. states gave up their right to tax. It's not easy. And they are all whining at this point of time outside the GST Council. So it's a huge challenge, but may at least acknowledge the problem now to solve the problem.
You mentioned the GST because that's the other problem to solve, how to reduce the complexity of the GST, because I think many people just get bogged down by the complexity, and of course it's a huge drain on our ease of doing business, if you that's what we started with. But thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Surya. Thank you, Abhijit. Thank you, Anil, for your time. Thank you for your patience. And thank you for weighing in on Union Budget Day. As Abhijit says, it should not be this big a spectacle, but it is. It's been like this for years on end. I was, before you came, Abhijit joined us, I was advocating that now we should do this for every state also, because as if half the things are managed by the states, if they are not half the problem they have to fix. So why do we only get fixated on the union budget? We should also get fixated on respective state budgets, at least the rich states. Lots of money.
So-
But we don't.
Just one interesting quip before we end. The big difference between the EU and India is the EU minus the financial integration, but with the foreign policy and military integration. And the EU is India without the foreign policy and military integration, but with much better financial integration.
Was I speaking to you, Abhijit, when you last mentioned the similarity between EU and India, or was it somebody? Oh no, okay. These were some people from Germany who would come down here and from Deutsche Welle, and we were speaking to them, and they actually said the same thing to me just a couple of days ago, that you already have an EU, because we were talking about the diversity and how there's so many languages, so many cultures, so many people. Say, oh, what we are trying to do in EU, you already have here. But yes, you're right. Minus the very, very important aspect of financial codependence or financial unity. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us, viewers. Thank you for watching this broadcast. Please stay tuned to the Times of India. We will keep bringing you the latest updates on the budget.